We are all interested in what will happen after we complete our earthly existence. But in fact, no less mysterious is the question of what happens to a person at the moment of death. What truths are revealed to him at this moment? What does he comprehend before he takes his last breath? After all, what we experience on the border of life and death can indicate what will happen to us next. When a dying person is ready to leave his body, a mysterious door opens in front of his consciousness, a portal to other dimensions. Looking into it, he is faced with unknown prospects of the other world. At the moment when the earthly reality melts before the soul, consciousness is freed from the shackles of the physical body and becomes a witness to mysterious phenomena that go far beyond our ordinary perception. Some who manage to survive such moments talk about what they saw. These stories are amazing and make you think, and you will also get acquainted with the incredible discovery of the outstanding scientist Andrei Gnezdilov, which radically changes the idea of life and death. After the end of our earthly life, our personality does not collapse. After completing this stage, we only change the state of consciousness. This is confirmed by observations of people at the time of their passing away, and especially the stories of those who survived clinical death. Andrei Gnezdilov worked for many years in a hospice, engaged in scientific and research activities in various fields of psychology, and became a world expert on the topic of death. Initially, he did not plan to pay close attention to this area of psychology, especially since he did not think that he would devote his whole life to it. However, after one incident, which it is impossible to talk about without tears, his fate and scientific activity changed once and for all. He said himself, "Once, when I was still a student and just beginning to learn the basics of my profession, I had to work as a doctor on duty. One day I went into the room where the girl was lying. Her parents were in another city, and she was all alone. I asked what I could do for her, and she was glad that at least someone paid attention to her, and asked, 'Uncle, tell me a story.' I picked her up, began to tell her, and to my horror, I felt that she was leaving for another world. I was scared and wanted to call a nurse, although I knew perfectly well that she would not help in any way. But the girl came to her senses and asked to continue. I told her about the fabulous creatures that would one day meet her in a magical castle. The baby died in my arms, and I was afraid to interrupt the story because I wasn't sure if she couldn't hear me anymore." Since then, Andrei Gnezdilov has changed his life path and began to actively study what happens at the moment of death and what awaits us after the end of mortal existence. Over the years of his research work, he has accumulated many cases that confirm the existence of life after death. He was repeatedly convinced that at the moment of leaving earthly life or during clinical death, a person can remain in a special state of consciousness. At the same time, a person does not experience the horror of death because he feels the continuation of life. It is at this moment that amazing events occur, which, according to the scientist, cannot be just coincidences. Andrei Gnezdilov gave some impressive examples. For example, in one of the rooms of the hospice where he worked, there were 2 dying patients. One of them was no longer reacting to his surroundings, and the other was still conscious. Realizing that he did not have long to live, he decided to take communion. When the priest, after fulfilling the request, was about to leave, he suddenly felt someone's gaze. The patient, who had been unconscious for several days, suddenly opened his eyes and blinked in response to the departing priest. He gave him communion. Andrei Gnezdilov commented on this case as follows: "This cannot be just a coincidence. A man who had been in a coma for a long time has regained consciousness. It was when the sacrament was performed that I had no doubt that the soul of the patient felt it. This man left immediately after communion, and at the moment when his soul was leaving his body, the last tear rolled out on his cheek. Moreover, at that moment there was an atmosphere of goodness and enlightenment in the ward, accompanying the disclosure of spiritual consciousness. Further observations and research have shown that in such a state, a person may have special visions that help him realize his imminent departure." The scientist also gave an example of a case that happened to his family. One day, a woman who had to go for a priest was surprised by such a request, because in the village where she lived with her mother, the church had long been abandoned. "Where will I go? You know that the church has been closed for many years," she said. But the older woman insisted, "Go get the priest." The woman went to the railway station, which was located not far from their house, and it was here that she met the priest, who, by an amazing coincidence, turned out to be at the station that evening. She hurried to him and asked him to come and confess the dying man. The priest agreed, and everything happened as it should have been. In the last hours of her life, the dying grandmother received the power that helped her to join the sacred grace and quietly pass away. According to Gnezdalov's observations, it is thanks to the emergence of spiritual consciousness that many people stop being afraid of what will happen to them before they die. The scientists assume that at such moments a person discovers the true meaning of earthly life. There is light at the end of the tunnel and the courage to step beyond the visible being. So, one of his patients admitted that she was not afraid of death. She said, "My life has been a happy one. I lived it in love with my husband, daughter, and granddaughter. I've learned everything I could about life, and now I want to know everything about what's beyond it." In the last moments of mortal existence, spiritual consciousness takes a person to a new level and allows them to concentrate all earthly experience before moving on. Perhaps this is the main purpose of the spiritual consciousness that arises before death. Gnezdilov told about the last moments of the life of another of his patients, who was an ordinary peasant woman. He was with her when she suddenly came to her senses. The dying woman beamed with joy at what she had to see. He asked what she saw, and she said, "I just found myself in some amazing place. I understood that I was in England. I was wearing a white bride's dress, in which I was walking down a beautiful staircase inside a large mansion. Everyone called me Margaret." Gnezdilov, surprised, decided to check her words and addressed her in English, realizing that for an illiterate peasant woman, his speech would seem incomprehensible. But to his surprise, she answered him in such beautiful English that this speech could only be from an aristocrat. After that, the dying woman closed her eyes and passed away with a smile. Analyzing such cases, Gnezdilov tried to find an answer to where these people get the strength that helps them resist the fear of leaving. Then he came to the conclusion that this is the manifestation of the spirit. These and hundreds of other cases prove that in addition to our world, there is an afterlife into which we will all fall after death. The researcher also said that death for a person has not only a negative, but also a positive character, because it gives our existence spiritual depth. Therefore, it is extremely important for a person to regularly reflect on death, because by forgetting about it, he violates the balance of justice. Then his transition to the afterlife can be very painful, as he will have to face the consequences of his negative actions. The spiritual consciousness does not lie. It does not relieve a person of guilt for the crimes committed, does not forgive betrayal and meanness, and does not correct their consequences. It is, in a sense, indifferent and serves as a mirror, reflecting and multiplying the inner qualities of a person. That's why a villain and a murderer will go to hell, and a good man will go to heaven. His own mental consciousness will become his supreme judge. It is not God who punishes or encourages a person, but he himself. As they say, nothing personal, just a physical law of nature. Like is attracted to like. After death, the villain goes to a place where evil reigns, and a good man goes to a place where good prevails. Andrei Gnezdilov advised us to always remember that each of us has a limited amount of lifetime, and therefore we need to use it correctly. Responsibility to life always means responsibility to death. But unlike earthly existence, nothing can be fixed at the moment of death. Of course, each person decides for himself what to believe and how to treat death, his own and someone else's. But still, it is worth listening to the words of Andrei Gnezdilov. After all, such a serious scientist would hardly pay so much attention to these issues if they were not of great importance. Anyone who has watched people die for decades had an immediate opportunity to look beyond the edge of earthly existence and see there what other scientists are afraid to admit. Write in the comments what you think about it, and whether you have ever experienced the spiritual consciousness that the outstanding scientist spoke about. And if you also hope that death is just a transition from one level of being to another. Dear friends, thank you for watching my video to the end. If you liked it, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's very important. Thank you, and have a nice day.